programs, and they have grown and continue to be of great value to administrators because, again, you're able to participate in the webinars on items that are immediately relevant to your practice. Next slide. So I'm going to turn it over now to Vicki, who will go over some of the technical functions of our participation in this Zoom webinar. Vicki.
Thank you, Charisse. So yes, we'll just go over a few items, housekeeping items in Zoom for those of you who may be unfamiliar with navigating in this platform. At the bottom of your screen, you will find the following attendee controls. If you don't see them, you just hover with your mouse at the bottom and they will appear. So you do have the option of muting and unmuting yourself. You will see a video there. If you do have a camera, then you can turn your video on and off there. There is a participant button there. We'll go over that more in just a moment. There's a share screen. Your host and co-host will be sharing their screen. And there is a chat. That's the primary way we will be communicating this afternoon. I'll go over that more in just a moment as well. You also see a leave meeting button at the right. We hope you will not use it, but just so you know it's there. Okay, so for the participant list, if you are, as you've joined, if you've either joined via your phone or if when you logged on, it just shows part of your name, if you can actually hover over your name and you have the option there to edit it, if you can please be sure that your full first and last name are entered, that would be very helpful. In the participant list, you also have options to, for example, raise your hand, lower your hand, ask your facilitator to go faster, slower, agree, disagree, and so on. Please know that they do act as toggles. So if, for example, you raise your hand and your facilitator addresses you, if you can please lower it, that way we know you've been addressed. Okay, so as I say, the chat pod is how we will be communicating this afternoon. Just click on the chat and it will appear on your screen. It defaults to communicating with everybody who's in the webinar, but you do have the option of communicating with just one individual by clicking on the Everyone button there, clicking on the drop down, and you will have all the participants listed there. So to chat, just go ahead and type your message in the text box and click enter, and your message will be sent. If you are attending this webinar with another colleague from your site, please be sure to enter his or her full first and last name in the chat box, and that way we can take accurate attendance. And lastly, just a reminder that this webinar will be recorded. At the end of the webinar, the recording will be posted on the CalPro calendar. It will be there within a week, so just to make sure you're aware. And if you do have any questions during the session as far as technical issues, please be sure to, you can either enter it in the chat box or you can email at vswindell@air.org. And with that, I will turn it over to Sue Pon. Sue, if you'd like to share your screen.
Okay, so I'd like to introduce the facilitators before we do that, Vicki,
okay.
If that's okay. So if you can get to the next slide. All right, so just a few more things before we get started with Sue and Joanne. Just to let you know, if you do want to request a certificate of attendance for your participation in the webinar, you can email us at calpro@air.org, and we would be happy to provide you with the certificate for this 1-hour webinar. And then the final slide that we have before we start is our introduction slide. And again, we are delighted. Sue Pon will be starting us off, and many of you know Sue. She is the former adult education director for the Oakland Unified School District, and we are also very fortunate at CalPro to have her serve on our professional advisory board. In that role, she helps with contributing ideas for what the field is demanding and needing as it relates to professional development. And she has an extensive history in creating family literacy programs, as you will hear in her presentation today. We are also joined with Joanne Durkee, and they will be co-facilitating really setting up a conversation around early childhood education and adult education. Joanne Durkee is the current board president for Mount Diablo Unified School District, and many of you may also know her as the former adult education director at Mount Diablo Adult Ed. Joanne also has an extensive background in early childhood education as it relates to sustainability in adult education, really in understanding our role in connecting that our parents are truly the student's first learner, and so our first teacher. And so with that, I will turn it over to Sue and Joanne. Know that there will be opportunities for chats throughout the presentation, as well as opportunities for you to ask questions in that group chat that Vicki shared with you. Sue, please take it from here.
Thank you, Charisse. Can you all see my screen?
I can see it.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So I want to say welcome, everyone. This is Sue Pon, and I want to thank you all for joining our discussion today.
And hello, I'll just say hello. It's Joanne Durkee. I'm very happy to be here and thankful for all of you for logging in with us.
So together, Joanne and I bring two different experiences from two different communities to this conversation. Our objective this afternoon is for you to be able to expand your understanding of the importance of early childhood learning, parent education, and adult education's historical and potential role. These are the questions that we will be discussing. What are we talking about? Why it matters? What is the impact on children, adults, and communities, or data? And what does adult ed have to do with it? We'll talk about how you get started with an emphasis on curriculum and instruction. And finally, funding. We'll also pose some specific questions about these for you to discuss. We'd like to start with Joanne. Why this webinar and why now?
Great, thank you, Sue. So some of you may know my background and more recent work in advocating for adult education, both through CCAE and California Adult Education Administrators Association, and as a school board member. It really comes from my 37 years of experience in adult education as part of a K-12 school district, and seeing firsthand the critical role adult education plays in our communities and in our school districts. More recently, though, there were two driving forces that brought me to recognizing the timeliness of focusing on this part of what adult education provides. First was the governor's focus on early childhood education. I know as adult educators, you watch the governor's budget very closely. So as you probably know, in his Governor Newsom's budget language, he's recognizing something many educators know well, and that's the importance and impact of quality early learning experiences. So this slide is just one key element from the budget language that is specifically is funding for a long-term strategic plan that will provide a roadmap for a more well-aligned, comprehensive early learning and care system. So I saw that as an opportunity again to look at, the role that adult education might play in that plan. So hearing about that focus, I was inspired to kind of put my thoughts together and write what we've been calling a white paper about the long history adult education has in providing an array of educational programs in this arena. This white paper has been adopted by CCAE and CAEAA and distributed, so some of you may have seen it already, to the field as well as to policymakers in Sacramento. So this slide is just showing kind of two specific statements from that white paper, and the white paper is a resource that we're providing to you today as well. So one is the well-being of families has been core to the mission of California Adult Schools since its inception. And secondly, California Adult Schools have a long history of providing parent education, cooperative preschools, and family literacy in communities through their K-12 districts. So these combined tell me that there is a critical role for adult education. History lets us know there's established expertise and knowledge base, and how it can fit into the current mission of adult education. Sorry. So these, I guess we're going to scroll in, right? The first one is talking about the fact that adult education, at least in my view, is being challenged to prioritize serving those most in need. Secondly, adult education being part of the K-12 system automatically creates critical points of access for parents to programs and resources. Some parents, as some of you, I'm sure all of you know, are most comfortable in their neighborhoods and in their neighborhood schools. Thirdly, as I mentioned earlier, there's established expertise in and experience with educating parents along with their children through adult education. And lastly, all of this provides for a more holistic approach for school districts serving families and communities. We all know that student success is linked to the well-being of their parents and their communities.
And I'd like to share a resource that supports the role of adult education in children's learning outcomes. Building Adult Capacities to Improve Student Outcomes, A Theory of Change, is a 5-minute video from the Center for the Developing Child at Harvard University. The theory of change is to focus on the development of the adults who are important in children's lives. One area is developing parents' skills so that they can not only be more effective parents, but so that they can also provide stability for the family. It's been my experience that the role of adult ed in children's learning is a hard sell to the public. And I think it's important for us to help them to see the connection to adult education.
So in order to have these conversations, and today, and then in hopes that some of you, if not all of you, will be having these conversations in your communities or at your school sites, it's critical that people are on the same page with terminology. So you probably have had this experience as I have, is that when you're in discussions related to this, people aren't always using the same terminology for the particular service or program that they're talking about. So we're going to go through quickly some defining terms. So at least for our conversation today, we're all in agreement. This slide will start with some familiar terms. Early childhood education can refer to any education, experiential developmental activities or programs for 0 to 5 years of age. The next one is preschool, including cooperative preschools, and it typically refers to developmentally appropriate activities, classes, programs provided by professionals using early childhood education curriculum for children ages 3 to 5 years old. And thirdly, is one that I hear used very casually a lot of times, so it might be daycare or childcare, refers to attending to the needs of children of any age outside of school hours by persons other than their parents or family members. And the fourth is parent engagement, which refers to parents directly involved in their children's educational experience, school, or program on site or on their own based on their understanding of how to support their children's learning.
And I'd like to note that in working with immigrant parents, I found that there can be different cultural expectations for parent engagement in schools. Our next term is LCAP, which is the Local Control Accountability Plan. These plans are required by school districts to account for their use of local control funding formula dollars. And as I go on to the next set of terms, I want to bring your attention to the handout that CalPro sent you before this webinar. You also have these terms. So some additional ones. Parent education refers to the learning that enhances parenting skills and practices. And this was previously an authorized adult ed program area in California. CBET, or Community-Based English Tutoring, arose from Prop 227, which passed in 1998. It changed the way English language learners were taught and changed bilingual education in California. As part of this proposition, CBET funds were allocated to improve the English of the adults in the community so that they could provide English tutoring to the children.
So I think there's a little bit more we could talk about with this, but I think I'm going to save it till later on when we kind of we reference this term, because in the interest of time. So
Okay.
okay.
The next term is family literacy, and the federal definition of family literacy is the coordination of these four components. And if you could please allow me to give you a quick example of a STEM school: science, technology, engineering, and math. In the adult ed class, parents engage in a science experiment from the children's science curriculum, learning science vocabulary as well as a scientific inquiry process. In pack time, in this example, some parents see the same science experiment when they visit their child's class and can better understand how their children are learning. In parenting time, parents develop questions to engage in a conversation with their children at home about this common learning experience. And I'd like to view the variety of the programs that we've been talking about on this two-generation continuum from the Ascend Network at the Aspen Institute. The continuum ranges from child-focused programs on the left to parent-focused programs on the right, with the whole family being served together in the middle of the continuum. And now we would like to bring your voices into the conversation. In the last 5 years, and Vicki, I think, will pull up a poll. In the last 5 years, which of these has your program offered? So if you could take a few minutes to let us know what you've been doing. So it looks like 3/4 of you have voted. Over 50% of you are offering preschool or co-op preschool. Over 50% are offering parent education. And almost 50% some sort of family literacy, and approximately 25% are offering daycare. Thank you.
That's really that's really interesting, and you know, it sounds like we're all on the same page of what we're focusing on. So so next we want to do a little chat pod. So thank you for participating in that. We'd like to find out what's going on in your community that supports early childhood learning, parent engagement, and parent education. So if you can just type in anything you can share about what specifically in your community is happening. Maybe something unique, or so I guess you have to click out. There we go. Uh-oh, I lost.
So I see from Susan that the district provides Parent University via LCAP. Thank you.
Oh, great. Okay, so.
Oh, they're starting to come in.
Okay. Right. Oh my gosh.
From Kim, they offer a laptop program for parents to check out. And
That's
Judy
that good old.
Flores, hi Judy, Parent University, TK, and early childhood courses.
Some work with First Five as well. That's great. We're going to talk a little bit about that as well. So,
That's
okay.
a good old wait time to get the chat started. Great. This is looking great.
And it looks like that many of you are already engaged with your districts in early childhood. So that's good to see.
Right. Right. Okay, we're going to move on to why it matters and what do we know about the impacts on children, families, and community? How do we justify providing these kinds of programs? And seeing your comments on the survey and the chat box, we can see that there's a lot going on. This is exactly what we were hoping to kind of inspire here, is a sharing of the different practices and successes and challenges. But soon I want to talk about how we, all of us collectively, can help others understand why it matters. What are the impacts? What's the data that we have, if any, on the children, on the adults, and on the communities? And as you heard earlier from Cherise, that Sue is very well known for the work she's done in family literacy. So she'll be providing us with some concrete examples of impacts.
Well, Joanne, you and I have different experiences from our work in our communities. We have both seen firsthand the positive impact on families and neighborhoods. However, one area that can be a bit daunting for adult educators is being able to measure the impact on the children. And I understand that Mount Diablo has made some great inroads in that area.
Yes, I've heard that concern actually recently as well. But before we get to that, I want to share a couple of slides that I think others might appreciate having. The first one, they actually came from a presentation I attended very recently that was put on by our local First Five executive director. And interestingly, he was doing a presentation to a business task force. So this one is taken from the Harvard Center for Developing Child. And it's I think most of us, again, know this, but it's really, there are a lot of people that don't, is that 90% of a child's brain development happens before age 5. The next one is making the same case kind of in a little different way. And again, thinking that he was speaking to a business organization, he wanted to talk about return on investment. And it's basically just showing that for disadvantaged children, there's the highest return on investment in the very early, again, 0 to 5. You can see the slope there in terms of impacts on education outcome, health outcomes, social behaviors, and employment. So this has a lot of implications for many of the student populations and families that adult education works with. Okay, so we're going to go on. So now in terms of, again, I've had it expressed to me, it's like we know how to measure outcomes for adults, but how do we measure outcomes for children? So again, it can feel like a little overwhelming, but Mount Diablo was fortunate to have partnered with our local First Five organization. And it sounds like many of you are familiar with it. For those who don't know, it's a nonprofit statewide organization, has regional sections as well that have their own governing bodies. So they each decide locally how to use their funds. So as their name indicates, their work is focused on the first 5 years of life. You may have seen some of their great ads on TV. So First Five Contra Costa became aware of Mount Diablo Adult Education's parent education cooperative preschools, as well as their family literacy programs with CBET that allowed, if you remember back in the day, for quote unquote babysitting. So their local board chose to fund an expansion of the co-op preschools to reach families in the lower socioeconomic communities. They also funded the family literacy centers to enable them to transform the babysitting into actual preschool. As part of this partnership, which has been in place for many years, Mount Diablo Adult Ed has been included in First Five's work on quality indicators in early childhood development and learning measures. The First Five across the state has been a leader in this work. So go to the next slide. And we won't get into the weeds of all this. I just kind of wanted to, put this in front of you to look into later if you're interested. They have a statewide program called Quality Counts California. And you can see that it's a collaborative between First Five California and the California Department of Education Early Learning and Care Division, so our own CDE. The goal is to improve the quality of early learning and care programs, including educating parents as to what quality looks like. You see it mentions QRIS, or Quality Rating and Improvement System, which then takes us to the next slide. You can think of it as kind of an accreditation tool, and we all understand those, right? And you can see there are 4 areas of focus in quality ratings. So notice the rating levels under teacher-child relationships. That, to me, looks like adult education, right? Within QRIS, there is a specific assessment tool that can be used by teachers to provide support to the students, the children, and create curriculum. It's the Desired Results Developmental Profile. It's a specific tool that measures the child's development. So those are all kind of things that are going on out there. And lastly, again, some of you that are doing preschool are probably aware of this very well, that there's something called the California State Preschool Standards. So it's important to know that framework is also available. So again, I just wanted to put these in front of you. I do want to underscore the value of working collaboratively with First Five as well.
Thanks, Joanne. I'd like to speak briefly about adult ed's role in children's education and why it matters. Certainly, if we improve the literacy skills of parents, we are affecting the entire family and future generations, as seen in this quote from the National Institutes of Health. And there's also community and social, community and social justice benefit. I'd like to share how Oakland has measured the impact on families in these 3 areas: parent literacy skills, skills to support children's academic progress, and family engagement. For parent literacy skills, the research indicates that one of the best indicators of a child's academic success is the education attainment of the mother. And this can be measured by CASAS test scores. For skills to support children's academic progress, research indicates that programs and interventions that engage families in supporting their children's learning at home are linked to improved student achievement. So Oakland measured this through parent participant surveys, tracking self-reported, perceptual, behavioral outcomes that measure the extent to which parents believe that they are better able to help their children do well in school, communicate with the school staff, and be more involved in their children's learning. For family engagement, the Oakland Family Literacy Program is aligned with district, state, and national family engagement standards. Again, this is measured through parent surveys, tracking participation in parent workshops, school-based volunteer activities, and school-based leadership activities. And evidence is also in the voice of this participant. When my child first started school, he was lost and behind in his studies. Now I understand the teacher when my children have a problem in school. I feel happy because I understand English. For me, it is very important for the education of my children.
So that's great, Sue. Thank you. That's a really profound statement. And I think I know that I've heard parents share that. I've heard teachers share, kindergarten teachers share, that the children coming in from our family literacy programs are so much better prepared, as are the parents. So we're going to do another quick chat pod here. And the question is, what data do you need to get buy-in to support this type of work? if you could just share we'll take a couple minutes here, or a minute.
So there's a question, buy-in from whom? The district, the community? I think
Yes.
both.
Yeah. It probably depends on what you see as the priority there for being able to move forward. Yeah, I'd want to respond to the adult ed program, specifically talking about parents of K-12 children. So your Cam is pointing out, that parents often have older or younger children. And we're going to talk a little bit about that briefly, but that is a concern in my mind. I think it's an area that was added, if you all know, sort of later, and so that tells me maybe there's a potential for some adjustments. Because I was thinking this morning about immigrant families, or some of our families, or maybe aren't as well educated or don't have the background, maybe don't understand the criticalness of 0 to 5. And their future success, is definitely impacted by that. So there's an argument for helping parents of very young children as well. But yeah, I think that's an adult ed advocacy issue that you're pointing out. I agree.
Mm-hmm. And we have here other data includes scores from elementary schools and a comment that needing support from the district. And we'll talk about partnerships later on this afternoon. All right. So we know that there's a critical role for adult education in children's learning, but what do the programs look like?
There's a wide variety, as we're seeing here, of implementation. So in addition to the continuum that Sue shared earlier, with programs ranging from being child-focused or parent-focused, I think it's critical to ensure appropriate response to local community needs. And that's, again, what some of your comments are pointing out. For some adult education sites, this has or will require a paradigm shift. And I think Sue has some experience with that in Oakland that she can share.
Yes, and I just want to acknowledge the comment about, before we move on, needing data on specific cultural needs of immigrant families. So, and I want to thank you all for your comments there.
Yes.
So yes, in terms of a paradigm shift, in fact, with adult ed funding flexibility in 2008, Oakland saw its existence, or Oakland Adult Ed saw its existence shift to supporting the district's mission and vision for children and full-service community schools. And for Oakland's family literacy program at the district level, it's about partnerships. Family literacy is seen as a first step to parent and family engagement. And at one point, the Oakland Family Literacy Program was within the full-service community school department on the district org chart. An example of being an integral part of the district's vision is that Oakland Adult Ed is written into the district's LCAP of services, Local Control and Accountability Plan. And for school partners, family literacy is seen as a resource in communicating with families, and this was evident with new immigrant communities, like with Muslim families. And what does it look like at the school level? Oakland's Family Literacy Program is located at and in partnership with K-12 schools. The family goes to school together. The school-age children go to their classes, the parent goes to the family literacy class, and the very young children go to babysitting. And maybe they even do their homework together. What you see on this slide is what we give interested school partners. And what I like to highlight to them is that we're asking for a commitment of parents. This is not a drop-in program. We offer instruction of sufficient intensity and duration in order for parents to achieve learning gains. And I also like to highlight that our classes are taught by credentialed teachers in a program with WASC accreditation. And we'll talk more about curriculum and instruction in a few minutes. Joanne, what does Parent Ed look like in Mount Diablo?
Well, similarly, when Mount Diablo Adult was concerned about being able to continue the array of parent education and preschool programs back in the day, so like most adult schools, their funding was decreased significantly. And originally, the parent education program was eliminated. Of course, you know, as part of the things you could spend adult ed funding on. But fortunately, when LCFF and LCAP came along, it was determined that the programs that were being offered to immigrant families, those who do not have access to preschool programs, were important to maintain. So I'm going to run through this rather quickly because I can tell from people's responses that this is all very familiar territory to you, but I'll just run through this list. So we have family literacy centers with preschools. Those are actually buildings that we were able to put in using the CBAT funding that fortunately came to adult education. And those are still there today. They're specially designed buildings for this program on 2 of our elementary schools. There are family literacy classes with childcare at other elementary schools. There are parent education cooperative preschools at some key locations in our community, again, where folks don't have access to preschool. And there are a number of specialized parent education classes and courses. So very quickly, some of you might know these Loving Solutions and Parent Project, which are designed specifically for parents who are very challenged with their children's behavior. We offer it in English and Spanish. The next 2 are teen anger management and teen drug, alcohol, and vaping as programs that were designed in collaboration with the school district so that administrators or counselors at the middle schools and high schools can refer students to if they get caught with any, they're having issues with any of these areas, and they have to attend with their parent, which enables adult education to be involved. They continue to do a parent education speaker series for parent clubs, for professional development throughout the district. And then there's an annual, sounds similar to what someone mentioned, the Parent University Back to School Parent Conference.
I see that Adult Ed in Mount Diablo provides parent ed services to your district in many, many ways. Joanne, you also have a broad perspective as a school board member and president. Why would a school board member support adult education in early learning?
Well, good question, Sue, and I'm glad you asked. I saw a comment, I don't know if I can remember the name, but this was needing district support and superintendent support. And this is exactly why I wanted to be involved in this, because as a sitting board member, my view is just slightly different. And I see it as an opportunity that to bring this conversation to the higher level. And I think it can be a win-win. But to get back to the slide, again, it's adult ed can easily demonstrate, and again, it's why we did the white paper, this long time experience providing early learning and parent education. There was mentioned, Sue mentioned, we have credentialed teachers who are early childhood education experts. In fact, in our district, when transitional kindergarten was coming in to be, our designated district level staff person tapped our then parent education coordinator to help develop the curriculum, select and train the staff. And also, I just want to mention that being part of a school district, adult education has a natural way of connecting and engaging with parents through the school sites in all of the communities that make up the district. And then we touched on this earlier, that doing this work is consistent with adult education's focus. And again, maybe this is my bias, that, really challenged to serve those most in need, including low income, limited English members of our community. And obviously, as I was saying, it's a win-win. It can support the school district's goals for the students, because again, as the parents improve their education and that they are better able to work with their children, the students, their students are going to do better.
So now we have 2 questions for your discussion. What opportunities do you see for supporting preschool and school-age students in your programs? And what relationships do you see as critical to developing support for preschool and school-age students? So if we can take a few minutes for you to share. So I see Kim poses a lot of questions that maybe we can answer afterwards.
I'm well aware of the challenge for high school districts, districts that are strictly high school districts. But I know that I've heard that some have been able to establish good connections with their feeder elementary districts. And again, I'm just going to keep saying this, that I think that, that's why the white paper is kind of like, if we can put out there that this is an expertise that resides with your local adult program, if that's true, and kind of market it and brand it as a resource, because school districts that are trying to do it on their own don't necessarily have the parenting education background. We have credentialed teachers in parent education. We have credentialed teachers in early childhood education. That's an expertise that isn't just out there everywhere. So I think it's a kind of a branding marketing strategy to do good, not be manipulative. But
as a general comment on your responses, certainly your programs are looking to the school district, to the county, to the community in developing relationships to serve families together.
Yeah, there's some great successes in here. You can see people are reading these comments.
Good. In the interest of time, maybe we should move on.
Yeah, we're actually right on time, Sue.
Okay.
We got that time. I was pushing myself along here, but we're good now. So
okay.
Okay. All right. So again, for those of you that haven't started or want to expand, how do you get started? So curriculum instruction is a critical. An important element of a successful program obviously is sound instructional practice. And certainly adult ed has instructional experience from previous parent ed and CBIT programs.
And we'd like to share with you now some best practices to start new programs, or many of you are experienced maybe to add to yours. As I mentioned earlier, partnerships are critical to family literacy type programs. In a recent parent English class in Castro Valley Adult School, the learning objective was determined together among the partners, the elementary school principals, the community liaison, and the adult school staff. And the instructional goal was for parents to be able to speak with school staff and to ask questions. And this led to a very focused, school-centered ESL curriculum. The language skills were embedded and contextualized within the content. With a single class offering by default, the class is multi-level. Here is an example from Oakland of ESL instruction which incorporates the elementary school curriculum at the partner school. An EL Civics unit on emergencies was a starting point. And then instruction included the third grade science content on earthquakes. Here is another example of integrated curriculum. The high school history class and the family literacy parent class are working together on immigrant stories with an analysis of push-pull factors. And I like to think that this quote from a partner principal articulates the value of classes for parents on the school campus. Parents are integrated into the collective of the school. Parents have access to the language their children are learning in the same space their children are learning. And Joanne, what are some best practices in Mount Diablo?
Well, one I want to focus on is, when the first 5 came in to Mount Diablo and enabled them to add preschool to the Family Literacy Center programs, the CBAP funded programs. We were still, I think the 2 departments were still working somewhat in silos, and there was probably some professional integrity challenges, between the ESL department, who obviously are the experts in, language acquisition, cultural sensitivity, and, proficiency, et cetera. And then the parent ed department, which had a long history of doing co-op preschools, so have all this expertise in early childhood. And I think it took a few years before the realization that the 2 needed to be working hand in hand. And so that to me was a big game changer when the preschool teachers and the family literacy centers and the preschool teachers and the co-op centers, or the parent, that really at the co-op, they were parent ed teachers, right, along with the coordinators or other staff in those departments. It's to work together to come up with curriculum and teach each other, again, share their specific expertise. So that, again, I think made all the difference in moving things forward in a really positive way. So, and then of course you've heard me say, and I see other people chiming in, that they are connected to their local First 5. First 5 was key to the governor's budget language. They've been working on this for years, and Newsom was very responsive to it. And so I feel like they're going to play a critical role going forward. So to at least know who they are in your community and look for any opportunities to collaborate and partner, even if it's not funding, but still to partner.
So once there is commitment to these programs as being critical to the local community and school district, What funding sources support and allow for these types of programs?
Okay, so as Sue and I have both experienced, it can take a variety of funding sources to provide the breadth and depth of a program.
We've previously mentioned the importance of staying focused on fulfilling the mission of adult education to serve those most in need. And this can enable us to see these programs as part of certain funded, whoops, there we go.
That's okay. Let me back up a little bit too.
Hair trigger here. That these programs can be seen as part of certain funded categories.
So,
did you want to say a few words about immigrant integration, or?
Yeah, I can comment on that. So again, I don't know if everyone's familiar with this, but it was something that was added, or I should say it's added, but it was actually a bill that got passed through the work of CCAE and CAEAA. But it originated, the term immigrant integration originated with what's called Allies, which is a Bay Area program that's been in existence for a number of years with ESL faculty between adult education, several adult schools and several community colleges. And they actually developed this framework for immigrant integration, and it shows a number of different elements. So that's out there. That led to, and they've been funded to do pilots programs with the immigrant integration framework. That led to AB 2098, again, through the advocacy of our two professional organizations. And the original intent was to get to adding metrics to the adult ed program. My concern was, that the focus seems to be on the right-hand side of the spectrum for an adult learner and transitioning to the community colleges or transitioning to work, et cetera. And it was important to focus on where a lot of our families, immigrant families are, and basic skills learning families are on the other side of the spectrum. And so, but we don't have good metrics necessarily. And so immigrant integration had the possibility of some wonderful metrics that could be added. So they didn't get added, but they did establish a work group, and some of the folks we all know are on that work group. And it's, as it sounds, it's a work in progress. So they're hopefully making some strides that ultimately will result in some additional metrics. So it's something to keep your eye on. And I think if you don't have the Allies immigrant integration framework, it would be something to be good to look at. Okay, I'm catching up with myself here. So in terms of adult ed funding, as we all know and love, the language, as we kind of referenced earlier, it says it allows for adults training to support child school success. And so, as was implied, it's implying, kids that are in the K-12 system. So that in itself is a challenge. And I said this earlier, is that, hopefully there's some room for improvement on that category. The next one is also been mentioned I see a lot of folks have saying that some of their parent ed or programs are being funded through LCAP. I'm not going to read this slide to you, but there's 3 bullets that talk about parent engagement or parent participation. And in speaking with our director who's in charge of our LCAP program, Mount Diablo, she's saying that each district has the option of identifying their own measurable, what's the term I'm using? Their indicators, that's the word I was looking for. So our district has just chosen indicators to including those participating in the preschool, parents that are participating in the family literacy and the preschool programs as an indicator. So, okay.
So those are some funding sources. we'd like to ask you now, what are other funding sources that you know of or that you use? If you could put that in the chat pod. Thanks.
Great. Someone provided the link for the Allies white paper.
So Title I and Title III, thank you, as funding sources. CalWorks, Laura Dutch, hi. Other funding sources?
Well, I was just to add that, you know, if it's, as we already do, it's important to keep an eye on the state budget because, again, the governor had some big picture items, not some of them not very specific as yet, but of course, certainly that plan. And so, you know, being at the table as part of the planning process, I think would behoove adult education.
Mm-hmm. So we see local grants, partnerships with the YMCA.
Yeah.
First Five again. PTA. National Family Literacy Institute.
Great.
All right. Well, thank you.
Okay, so we're going to just do a very quick, we only have a few minutes left, a quick recap here. So we talked about the adult education history, experience, and expertise in parent education and early childhood education. We talked about a couple of models that are in place, and then all of you have shared a lot of information about other models. We shared information about a potential key partner. In fact, the key, again, to the governor's budget is First Five. We looked at adult education program category for this work. We know we need some work there, but we need to keep our eye on that and advocate for that. We talked about the use of LCAP dollars, or LCFF actually dollars, and different ways that that can be done. And then I hope that we painted a picture of existing connection and opportunity for deepening that connection between adult schools and their K-12 districts for the betterment of both entities, the students, the families, and of course the community. So now Sue is going to share some of the resources that we talked about today.
I just want to bring to your attention these resources that we've referred to are in your handout that CalPro sent before the webinar. And here's the contact information for Joanne and myself. And we have just a few minutes for any other questions that you might have. And I'm wondering if Vicki or Charisse, you can answer the question about the PowerPoint being available.
Yes. Hi, everyone, and thank you so much, Joanne and Sue, for your wonderful presentation. There was some great information shared and some great questions asked as well. We will be able to email you a PDF of the PowerPoint following the webinar. And we want to make sure that you're aware that we offer the Administrative Forum webinars 4 times a year. This is the last one for this fiscal year, but we will be starting up again in the early fall, and we hope that you will be joining us for the future Administrators Forum webinars. Thank you again so much. I've also asked that we capture the list of the funding ideas that were shared, and we would be happy to share that with you in the email with the PowerPoint as well, once we get that captured and formulated. Thanks so much, and have a great rest of the afternoon, everyone. Thanks again, Joanne and Sue. This was great.
Good.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks for having us. Thank you.
And just a quick reminder that I will be emailing an evaluation to everyone after the webinar as well.